So here is the gearbox cleaned up. And there was a lot of old dirt, grease, and grime and whatnot in there. But cleaned it all up, as well as all the other parts. Now, I did say I showed you all the parts I am putting in it. So you're kind of probably wondering, what parts am I going to use? Well, first off, I'm going to use the stock aluminum cylinder. It is already ported. The stock piston head that is also ported. The purpose of ports is so, well, when there's compression, it expands the O-ring, getting a better compression, make sure there's always 100% air seal. And also, when the piston is coming back out of the cylinder, there is not a vacuum in there. So, I'm going to be using the stock one there. I'm going to be using the stock air nozzle. I could have got one with the inner O-ring, but I decided to wait and see what this chrono is at, because I know it's chronoing around 340 and 345, so I don't want to go too much over because the limit for CQB is 350 around here. The stock M100 spring, oops, screw, stock tappet plate, a ZCI aluminum spring guide, which we can go ahead and open. It has ball bearings, which are very nice and smooth. Wow, they're very nice. It's actually, this whole piece turns on the spring guide. They actually spin quite well. Not sure how this is going to fit in the gearbox, but it should fit pretty good. From the reviews I read anyway. The spring set. I'm not sure if we're going to be using all of the springs, but we are going to be using some of the springs. SHS 8mm hardened steel bushings. S&H shims to shim the gearbox. You can reuse shims, but if they're bent or really old and worn, I recommend getting new ones. S&H ZCI aluminum cylinder head, not SHS. Open that up. Very nice quality, has double O-rings, which means it'll fit inside the cylinder better, but that's okay because we're going to be correcting the angle of engagement anyway, and that's going to help us out. Nice soft rubber on the back, so that's nice. It'll also improve air seal because it's not two pieces. Going to be using the stock motor, which I do have to clean up. If it doesn't pull the spring back with the 12-to-1 gears, then we can swap it out for a strong run, but we're going to try it. Let's see. A Garter, or Apex Garter Mosfet, which is pretty little from the looks of it, but we'll open it. I never used one of these, but the reviews were very good on it, so I decided to get one and try it. As you can see, the wiring is quite nice, and the Mosfet itself is very, very tiny, which is very cool because, well, it don't take up a lot of room. But the signal wire is a blue signal wire, and then you also need to run another wire directly from your battery to your motor. So I'll be showing the schematic about this later. And lastly, our gears. These are SHS 12-to-1 gears. Pop the staple off the top. There we go. So we got our Spur Gear here, which actually looks very close to the stock Spur Gear, but I don't know, maybe it's been replaced, but it does have SHS 12-to-1 stamped on the bottom. The SHS pinion, you can see it has a lot more anti-reverse latch teeth, which is really cool because that means it's not doesn't have so much back play on it when there's spring tension on it. So that's pretty cool. And then the S&H sector gear, which is actually a little bit thinner, I do believe, but is very strong. This is actually a two-piece design. You can see the two Allen head screws up there, but I do believe the other one, no, I was going to say the other one might have a selector chip on it, or a delay chip, but I don't believe it is. I'll check it for sure. But very nice quality gears. Guess we'll see how they hold up though. So those are all the pieces. Well, one more thing. The stock trigger contacts when the wiring's going to go. So we will get to work and start installing all of these pieces in the G&G gearbox. So I just wanted to point out that here's the SNH 12-to-1 sector, and here's the original sector gear. You can see they have the same number of teeth up around that catch the piston, and then on the bottom, that's where the real difference is. This one has a lot more teeth and a bigger gear on the bottom than this one does. So this will hopefully give us a lot better rate of fire and also a faster trigger response. So if you combine high-speed gears with a low torque or a high torque motor, you'll get great trigger response. So we're gonna see what that does for us. So we're gonna start with shimming here because that's usually the longest process of everything. So here's our new bushings. Again, sorry if my voice sounds bad. I do have a little bit of a cold. So just go ahead and pop the bushings in. One thing you will notice that these usually sit quite flat with the gearbox. So when people shim, they usually have the gearbox like this. A lot of people will put their spur gear in, and then their sector or bevel gear in, and shim it accordingly to the spur gear, and then put their sector gear in, and then shim that according to the bevel gear or spur gear. And that does work okay. I've done that before, but the best way is but the part that's kind of bad about that is you're forgetting your pinion gear coming in from the to the bevel gear. So that's where you usually get the most noise out of your gears. It's right where the motor connects to the bevel gear like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to shim the bevel gear to the pinion gear, and then the spur gear to the bevel gear, and the sector gear to the spur gear, or more or less the bevel gear. So that way we have the best mesh between the bevel gear and the pinion. So I just finished shimming. Like I said before, I'm shimming to the pinion gear on the motor instead of the spur gear, and everything else accordingly. One thing cool about these shims, as you may know, is the one is brass colored, which means it's the thickest shim. Then it's swapped around here. The regular round silver one is the medium one, and then the hexagon shaped silver one is actually this littlest, and that's 0.1, 0.15, and then 0.2 millimeter shim. So that's just kind of cool how they code their shims. It makes it really easy to know which one you're getting and how thick it's going to be. But that's just kind of cool thing. I did shim my gears. I shimmed them as tight as I could without creating any friction, which is pretty much the whole purpose of shimming. If you want to know how to shim, check it out on YouTube. There's tons of advice on there. So you can see they turn nice and freely, but yet at the same time they don't have any up and down play at all. So that's kind of cool. Let's get on to installing all our other pieces. This is I want to say Lancer Tactical, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But it does hold up. So if you look at them, they are a little bit different. One thing you may know is there's a notch cut out on this one for the bushing, whereas this one just has a notch, like a lot bigger notch cut out. Other than that, they do look identical. So we're going to use this. If it gives us any problems, we'll switch back to the stock one. But go ahead and slide that into the back. Just like that. They'll slide back and forth nicely, so that'll work. Next, you'll need your cutoff lever. I'm just using the stock cutoff lever. Sometimes they're not real good, but I didn't get another one, so this is what we're stuck with. Next will be our trigger contacts, but we have some wiring to unsolder. So let me grab my soldering gun. There we go. Old wires unsoldered. We can go ahead and put this in because we can solder them back up even though even when the trigger contacts are in place. So as you can see, that's quite a lot of dirt for trigger contacts, but all clean now. I thought about replacing them, but it actually doesn't look like they need it. So one thing you want to check is to make sure the contacts aren't spread apart. That way it makes a good connection every time. You're not wondering why it's not firing every time you pull the trigger. Go ahead and pop that in. Tighten down your screw. Put your spring on. There's actually a little eye and a big eye on this one, so the post is a little bit thicker here to keep it from breaking, which is actually a pretty cool thing. Sometimes these posts will break. Not this one. Well, that spring looks like it's stretched. That's why we got our spring pad. There we go, we finally got that spring on. Stretched quite a little bit, but it still works perfectly fine. A&G beefs up their stuff a little bit. That's great and all, but not everything else will fit then. You just gotta tweak it a little bit. So I just had to bend the eye open a little bit to fit over that post and over that trigger contact post. So that's working great now. We can move on to wiring. Now, a lot of times, gearboxes will have a piece of metal that comes up and around and then have a hole in it for your body pin. And this is all solid metal in here. This one doesn't. And I'll show you why that's a good thing. So when we put our spur gear on, turns nice and quiet by the way, our Mosfet will actually fit right in here, like this. Now, again, this is sort of a little bit risky, you could say, because if you get out, if it gets out of line, it'll get torn up. But if we turn it like this, on lead on its side, it'll actually fit quite nicely. In fact, I was going to say, if we Dremel down that post right there, we'll be able to fit it right along the side, and every time we take the gearbox off, it'll be right there, and we'll have to deal with the extra wires coming out. So I'm going to see if, I'm not sure if I'll be able to do that, but I will try to do that. Don't want to screw anything up, of course, but I'll see what I can do with that, and show you guys once it's done. So I'm going to work at that next, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. So as you can see, I finished all my wiring. I did end up using the old connectors that were right here, which worked out great actually. You just cut the wires off as short as you can. You can smash them flat to make them lower profile, and then just solder them on top, the new wires on top, which works out quite nicely. So what I have is right here, have my thin Mosfet wire running up to the base of the trigger switch. Then I have my longer wire right here, that is my negative, and the Mosfet came with red wiring. I just spliced into a black one because it was too short anyway, so I can know which one to put on which side of the motor. The shorter one right here with the male connector is this one right here, but I also spliced it right here and ran my other small Mosfet wire up to my trigger contacts. So we can test this. I'll test this out in a bit, and check if it works. But after that, we're ready to start putting parts back in. So next part, we'll be putting in our compression stuff. Here's our aluminum cylinder. Make sure the port is to the back of the gun. Here's our aluminum cylinder head, which fits really tight in there. That's okay, because it'll make sure we get a great air seal. So let me just try to get this in here. There you go. That looks pretty nice. We'll have to turn it to align the port with the window of the gearbox, but put that in place. That does seem to work pretty good. Here's our piston head, and we'll get our piston over here. I think I did forget to mention that when I was going through the parts, I do believe I forgot to show you the piston. Maybe I did, I'm not sure. I can't remember. So here's our piston. I'm not going to Swiss cheese this piston, I don't think. It's pretty light as it is, and I want this gun to be reliable, and I'm not too worried about rate of fire, but this here row of teeth, I'm not sure if it's glued in or not. I don't think it is. Nope, no it's not. So we can pull that out right like that. And no, it's not glued in. So we're going to glue this in with a little bit of super glue. Go ahead and scrape out the trays, make sure there's no junk in there. There's some sticky stuff, but go ahead and grab our super glue. Put a little in the tracks. Don't want to get any on the outside of the piston. Obviously. Doesn't take much, just enough to hold it in place. They do use a glue, but it's not a hard glue, it's just more of a gel or really sticky gel that holds it in. Go ahead and slide your row of teeth back in. Jam them up against. It's not quite in the whole way. There we go. It's in nice and straight. If there's any glue in between the teeth, just use a screwdriver or something to clean it out, because you don't want any glue in there. Now we can go ahead and install our piston head, which does in fact look like it'll pop on there very nicely. You grab your aluminum spacer with the screw on it and try to line that up in there. Can be a little bit of a tricky process, but once you get it started, it should go in fairly easily. Just hold your piston head, turn that tight. There you go. There's our piston right there. So I'm going to be replacing the O-ring on this piston head. Also, here's some rubber faucet washers to correct the angle of engagement. But I found that the best O-rings for the piston heads are the 15/16 3/32 thick O-rings. So also note sometimes they're number 4 O-rings, but where I get them they go by inches. So we'll put a little bit of lube in here, but let's just test our air seal. Wow, we get 100% air seal without any lube, and it moves in very nice. So that's going to be perfect. So let's check our angle of engagement. Go ahead and put the cylinder and piston in. There you go. Sector gear is in place. Now our best angle of engagement is right there. Now, it does look like we'll have to take the first tooth all the way down and the second tooth maybe just a little bit of the way down. But go ahead and pop your cylinder out. Add a faucet washer. Put your cylinder or piston back in. Chest it again. From the looks of that, that looks right where we want to be.